A consecrated burial ground for 800 years. There are about 880 gravestones here, with obviously with a number of them will have 5, 6 people on the gravestone. So you might have 2,000 people that are commemorated here, buried here, or whatever. There are tens of thousands of people buried here, because the burials will have been going on well before we were putting gravestones up. In consecrated ground, you would have had burials here from the Blackfriars time. Eventually you got a Greyfriars monastery over there about 1530, 1540, and they've been burying people here for years and years, for centuries. So you will have about 800 years. You must have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. I have no idea. Lots and lots of people. There'll be no way of actually counting anyway. So what we are going to cover, I promised you, the Scottish diaspora, because very sad. I went away on holiday last year to the south of France, having committed myself to do a history of the town with a walk through the Auld Kirk. And the reason I did that is because my mum was 89 and sugary, and I reckoned I could get her on this, whereas I couldn't get her on something for that was going to take 2 miles or 90 minutes of walking. So we did that. And it was the only time that I've done something in Ayr that I've been overwhelmed, because you kept looking at the graves and you thought, my God, there's a story there. What happened there? Where did that come from? Because this is the main graveyard for the town for that 800 years, and certainly for the last 200 years when we've been commemorating things. And what we're going to do today is we're going to highlight a number of things, but one of those is what's called the Scottish diaspora. That's when Scots left because either they were merchants, they had an education, they had a trade, they were impoverished, they were cleared, or it might have just been just after Culloden they were actually all evicted out, emigrated over to Canada, America, and various other places after that. When you look at, I'm not entirely sure I believe these figures, but we'll go with them anyway. Wikipedia is not always perfect, but when you look at the US, apparently there are 6 million Scots in the United States, 5 million in Canada, 1.8 million in Australia, 800,000 in England, Argentina, 100,000 people that are descended from Scots, Chile 80,000, France 45, Poland 15, New Zealand 13,000. I don't believe that.
No, there's more than that.
There's way more than that. Because we keep saying, he's an awful good rugby player. I wonder if he's got any connection to Scotland. Oh, that's fine, John Leslie, you come over here and play for Scotland. Hunky-doo. And South Africa 11,000 apparently. But the Scots travelled far and wide, and there was many reasons for that. And one of the reasons was education. And we're going to try that. Scottish education had a massive advantage. 2 massive advantages. You actually had the Scottish Reformation. A lot of things about the Scottish Reformation that are not wonderful, but one of the things that happened was Knox and his cohort said, we want a school in every land, every parish. So there were schools in every parish from about 1695 onwards. We're certainly not talking about 1580, 1570 when it happened. And by the end of things, by the 17th century, 15% of women could read and 65% of men could read. There were schools to teach them sewing and various other things of women, and it was still a very chauvinistic environment. But there would probably be no other environment and country in the world that 65% of the population, the male population, could read, and 15% of the female population could read. You had 3 universities to start off with around about the 1530s, St Andrews, Glasgow and Aberdeen. That was a surprise, I'm from Edinburgh. I thought we were first, but we're not. Fairly standard universities, and what happened was you would have a teacher, and that would take you all through your 3-4 years. One teacher. I'm reasonable at maths, but I'm absolutely rubbish at chemistry and physics. Why would you have me to take you through a chemistry and physics class? So a guy called Andrew Melville said, this is daft. And he went to, he was the rector, or he was the Hedy of Glasgow University, and he said, let's get specialists for the field. And so what happened is he transformed the education system in Glasgow University. And then apparently he went to assisted Aberdeen and St Andrews University in the way that they had their teaching as well. And eventually Edinburgh University came on board. The Edinburgh University is quite interesting. I don't know if I cover. If I do cover this later on, I'm not going to cover it now again. However, Edinburgh University is quite important because there are 2 major universities in the world that are based on Edinburgh University at the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century. Okay, one of them is the 3rd university in England, because until the end of the 18th century there was only 2 universities in England, Oxford and Cambridge. And then around about 1815, 1816, London University came on board, and it's based on the way that Edinburgh University started as well. And we will cover another one later on, because I've just stopped myself there because I was going to go into another one there, but I'll cover that later on. Okay, so hence the reason, if you have an education, you have a massive advantage in the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries over other people, because if you can read and write, you can tell people what they're doing. Hence the reason the Scots were, they talk about the English had the empire, but the Scots ran it, and much of that is because of the fact that we made really good decisions about education very early on. We probably did a lot of bad things with our education, and I'll give you one of them now. Jim, move yourself. If I can find this. So we have, somebody show me, there we go. So we have William Lame, and in memory of his wife Mary Smith, and all Lamb. Thanks. Okay, that's good. All right. No, you're right. It's let me excuse. So William Lamb, and he died in Demerara in 1833. Those of you who have not been on the tour before, what's the issue about 1833 in Demerara? 1833 is the year we abolish slavery in Britain. We have the Abolition of Slavery Act, and all the slaveholders are recompensed for their loss. Poor them. They lose all their slaves. And it's closer than you think, because it's not just big people that have lots and lots of slaves. It's people like Catherine Frances Heron, who lives at 16 Wellington Square, I think it is, where the Rupee Room is. She has 3 slaves in Jamaica, and it's like her share portfolio. You sit down and you're chatting away over a nice cup of tea. Well, I've got these 3 natives in Jamaica, and my factor moves them about from place to place, and I get a yield from them. Not even thinking about the human cargo that's involved. And she is recompensed to the tune of £89 and 4 shillings for her 3 slaves. But you have a guy in Symington, I think the guy's name was Bogle or something like that. When I increased his recompense from inflation, it came to about £4 million. There are significant people in Ayrshire. However, when they left Jamaica, they needed to find another opportunity. And the opportunity they found was Demerara. It's a shame, and it is a shame that wee William died in there. But your man Lamb was making a fortune in Demerara, trying to basically continue the slave trade. Okay? So, there we go. This is where
Something else.
David Lemon talks about his has 3 children. David Lemon, I think when I read this, he dies about at the age of 79. His son David, he dies in Jamaica at the age of 25. His son Walter dies in Buenos Aires, and he's about 35. And his other son Robert dies in Calcutta, and he is 30. One grave, the 4 corners of the world, just about. Okay? So, where are we going? Did you say 305? All these graves were actually recorded, twice it was recorded by around about the turn of the century, that's actually 2000, and they were recorded in the 1980s. So I'm standing on William McVitie's grave, and he was the son of Thomas McVitie. Thomas McVitie was the managing director of the Bank of Australia. How the Scots travelled and where they travelled to. And you know, if he's the managing director, he's not a dafty. Okay? So, where are we going after this? What about 188? No, what have you got over there? Alright, okay, well this way. No. Joe, we'll go there in a minute. Sorry?
Is that right? No, it's still
Thou shalt not allow, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Exodus 22, verse 18. I'll try not to quote the Bible too often, because if there is somebody up there, I will get shot down by a bolt of lightning. So, at this point we need to make sure I know where the end of this is. I have used this pedestal before, and I'm told it's safe. So you need to introduce yourself to James the 6th of Scotland and 1st of England. He's born on the 19th of June, which happens to be that was my father's birthday, but not in 1566. He's the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, and he's the great-grandson of Henry VII of England. That's quite handy. That's the reason he becomes James the 1st of England, because there's lots and lots of connections. He's a talented author, and he writes 3 books of note. One is called The True Law of Free Monarchies, and that really says, by the way, this is how we run a monarchy. If you're a king, this is how you do it. And he does believe in the divine right of kings, so that basically means he wants you to bow to him and all these other things. Basildon Donan, which is a royal gift, how to become an efficient monarch. And Jill is going to show up. He also writes demonology. And demonology is a very important book, very sinister book, because that basically talks about the comparisons of magic, sorcery, and witchcraft. There have been books about witchcraft beforehand, but they've not really been how to identify it, and they've certainly not been endorsed or written by a king. So, and one of the things you've got to say about James I and VI is, in spite of everything, he's an intelligent guy. And for those of you who are familiar, this is an intelligent king is not an oxymoron, right? He is an intelligent king, should cookie, but this mass hysteria about witchcraft happens all over Europe and the colonies. So you have Shakespeare at this time writing Macbeth about the witches, and they used the witch trials of North Berwick as an influence. And the witch trials of North Berwick were directly connected to James VI. You have people like Matthew Hopkins, the witch picker, who is a witch finder extraordinaire, and he works between 1644 and 1646, and he uses one of these. It's a witch pricker. Witch pricker, and it's a big long spike, and you might have a blemish on your skin that doesn't discolour when it's pricked. Lo and behold, you have the witch's mark. That's enough to do you. 300 witches were done by 300 women and some men were done by Matthew Hopkins over that 2-year period before he was hounded out. How many of you have got daughters? I like this. Okay. When we talk about James I and James VI, and there is a relevance to Ayr, by the way, in this, when we talk about James I and James VI, you have to think about the Salem witch trials, because the Salem witch trials happened in 1692, and what happened in the Salem witch trials is keep your hand up if you've got a daughter, okay? And if I mention something that she's not done, put your hand down. Okay? So your hands stay up. A guy called Samuel Paris had a daughter and a cousin, a niece, and they started screaming. No hands go down. No, perfect. No. They threw things about the room. No. They uttered strange things. Now, I've got a daughter and she really does utter strong things. She crawled under furniture and they contorted themselves into particular shapes. Right, so that would have been a poor show for some of your daughters, let me tell you. Because that was enough to do. There was 200 trials in the Salem witch trials and 20 of them were executed. 19 of them were hanged, and one of them, a guy called, I can't believe I didn't write that, Giles Corey. He refused to plead, because this is the thing, you can ask, you're a witch, and you go, I'm not, that's enough to do you. If you go, you're a witch, I am, I'm really sorry, and I've repented from my sins, and that's okay, and they'll say, okay, banished, that's your way. But Giles Corey doesn't. And what happens is he's laid on something like this, and stones were put on him. And more stones, come on, confess. More stones were put on him, and eventually he was crushed to death. And we all go, oh, because that's a really bad way. It is, he was an old man. He was a nasty murderer when you look at him, and quite a racist as well. So I don't know if you should have sympathy in that situation, but anyway, it's when you look a wee bit deeper. So Scotland has a whole load of witchcraft trials. We've got the witchcraft author in James VI there. So from 1563 to 1736, they reckon that 3,187 women and some men were accused of witchcraft in Scotland. They reckon 65% of them met their end. Excuse me. 65% of them met their end, and so 30% of them probably got away with it, or they were released. 84% of them were women, 15% were men. Anybody spot the flaw? 1% was an hermaphrodite. 7% were under 20. 8% were 20 to 30. 22% were 30 to 40. 22% were 40 to 50. 31% were 50 to 60. 7% were 60 to 70. And 4%, if they survived, were over the age of 70. What does that mean? As it always has. If you're good looking and young, you tend to get away with it. If you're older, you're accused. It's an easy, a wife that we want rid of, that's fine. She's okay. Maybe I'm cynical. And the accused could be people that gossiped or quarrelled or spread malicious rumours. There were key years. There were 1661 to 1662, 1649, and we'll come back to that, 1623, 20 to 30, 1597 and 1590 to 1591. Those were the years that there was purges of witches. Oh, let's go and get a witch. And there was loads and loads of them done. And they were done by they were by and large researched by the bailies, the elders, the magistrates, the provosts, the session clerks, the town clerks of the town. They would research them, they would say, that's a bad one. And that would be enough. First of all, why are we here? And the reason that we're here is there was a loft in the Auld Kirk called the Magistrates' Loft. And there was 5 people allowed in the Magistrates' Loft. 2 bailies, the provost, the town clerk and the treasurer. They were all they were the important men in the town. That's probably existing to 1817. Now, bearing in mind this starts in 1654, it's probably built in 1656, that's a long time. That there is the entrance to the magistrate's loft. It's the only loft that is no longer in the church. A very small loft, it's not a pit window, it's the entrance to the magistrate's loft. So you would have had these guys up there into the Auld Kirk and saying she's a bad one. That would be enough. Why are we here? This is William Adair. I don't know why I'm looking at my notes, because I never use them. William Adair is the minister of Ayr from about 1632 to 1639 to 1682. So he's the minister from 1656 to 1682. There are 29 women and 1 man accused of witchcraft in Ayr. 15 of them were in this head case's watch. Okay? Including 3 in 1650. Now that's important because you could have been I'm actually trying to work out where we're going. There we go. You could have been tried because somebody else, you confess yourself, by implication by other witches or by a witch pricker. Now, why would somebody accused of witchcraft, why would they actually implicate somebody else? How would they do that? How did they usually do things in the Middle Ages? Tortured. What do you think was the best form of torture to elicit a confession from somebody you reckon was a witch? Not hanging? Drowning? No, because you need them to come up again. Dunking? No, we didn't do very much of that in Scotland. That kind of, it's not a shame for goodness sake. Much more effective. What they did was they kept them awake. And kept them awake. And kept them awake. And kept them awake. And what happens when you're utterly exhausted? You hallucinate. And when you hallucinate, you can say, who was it? It was her. Who was it? It was there. And you just crave sleep after that. Okay? So that's probably why in 1650 there were 3 accused. Now think of the numbers. We've talked about 20 in the Salem witch trials. And we talk about 65 to 70% of 30 in Ayr. How many were executed? We reckon there was 20, the same amount in Salem. Now, we've got a whole lot of kids in the audience today. We've got 116 today. The most we've ever had is 85 before. My goodness, you like the sales. But do you not think we should be telling the story about the Scottish witchcraft trials rather than the Salem witchcraft trials, especially when it happened here, and especially when we've got so many instances of tragedy here? Okay, right, into the church. We're not going to the church for very long.